All right, what's up, guys? We are going to do a quick video on why Isaiah isn't jumping higher, even though his power clean and his front squat are way better. So there's a lot of things that go into this, so we'll just kind of get into it. Also, we are trying out or testing out the live, I guess like guests can join. So if you're watching this right now and you're in the chat, feel free to ask questions. Hopefully it doesn't work such that people just swipe up and like they are in the video as a guest. That would be awkward. But yeah, hopefully you guys will be able to ask questions live in real time during some of these episodes, I guess, as we kind of put them out. Anyways, Hunter's joining me. As you guys know, if you listen to the last podcast, Hunter is like our, I don't even know, how would you describe your job, Hunter?
Young Jamie, except for THP.
young Jamie. And if you don't know who that is and what that reference is, watch the Joe Rogan. What is it? What's the actual name of the podcast?
The Joe Rogan Experience
or something like that?
Yeah.
Joe Rogan Experience.
There we go.
That's almost like, it's pretty pretentious. I'm not going to lie. Like calling it the Joe Rogan Experience to me seems a little pretentious.
The backstory is pretty funny. Like he just created it completely on a whim. Didn't think anyone would listen. Didn't think anyone would care. He was like doing it in his house back when he like wasn't
That's
even
how
very
ours
popular. And now he's the most listened to person in the world.
Yeah, that's again how ours basically started.
Exactly.
We were like, hey, COVID, that's a thing. Let's just make a up.
We're
And
on
then
the same
Hunter shows up
trajectory.
and he's like, yeah, exactly. But this is on the same trajectory, I wish. But also, ours is a little bit different, you know, because wasn't he famous before that, like through MMA
X
and
Factor.
stuff? Oh, really?
He was the host for
X
X
Factor?
Factor. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I don't have that going for me, but
Yeah.
that's okay. We have other things on our side. Anyways, yeah, so let's get into this here. So the main question here, if you're watching Isaiah train, or you've been watching him over the last like couple of, I don't even know, maybe I guess like 3 years training with me, you'll notice that his numbers in the weight room have gone up significantly. So I think when he started working with me, I think his back squat maybe had just touched 315, I want to say, maybe 300, maybe not even 300. I'm not sure. I don't have those numbers right off the top of my head. I think his power clean was 225, maybe, and that was a full clean, I want to say. Maybe not even that high. 200 maybe. Now his front squat I think was 250 or something like that, maybe 265. He was pretty strong. He was kind of comparable to me, but if I remember correctly, his power clean was a lot less. Like he wasn't as strong as me in the weight room, like in terms of numbers, but his deep squat was more true. His power clean just wasn't like super heavy. I think he was like basically the same weight as me, but he was jumping way higher than I was because his volume of jumping was way higher growing up. And I mean that, and he's a better athlete than I am, so there's also that, but genetically speaking. But yeah, so then he starts working with me. His back squats over the course of 2.5 years, I think in the first like 3 months he started working with me, I want to say his back squat went up to like 350 or something like that, maybe higher, maybe 355 or 360. And his power clean went up to 225 to 235, maybe 235. This is when we started training hard, because initially it was just like getting his knee healthy. So, you know, we, for those of you who don't know, by the way, if you're listening to this and you don't know who Isaiah Rivera is, go look him up. Everything he's ever posted is on his YouTube or his Instagram, so you can literally see his entire progression. But yeah, so then he got his knee better with us or with me specifically. And I think his back squat, this is way before the business even started, actually. This is just me doing it pro bono. And Austin Burke, his current roommate, advocating for me. It took like 6 months to get him back to like really deep squatting, totally fine, like totally healthy, because his knee was that bad. And when he did that, like I said, I think within the first 2 to 3 months of training, he jumped up to 350 or something, like I said. His front squat he couldn't even really do. So then over the course of the next like 2 years, he was basically prepping for competitions and always basically trying to stay healthy. So he, after doing that for, also we're getting questions, it's pretty cool. So after doing that for, I think, like I said, like 2 years or whatever, finally gets to a point where he hits like 360 or 3 345 or something in his back squat. So it couldn't have been 350. Whatever it was, I don't know. Because when he came to do the training camp with me, he was squatting like, his max was like 350 and he ended up hitting like 385. So over the course of that time, it was mostly keeping him healthy, getting him capable of training, but also like sprinting regularly, dunking regularly. He also was dealing like with personal issues occasionally. So sometimes we were ebb and flowing in and out of like good training cycles, but he always trained. It just wasn't necessarily like according to the plan. So that said, his vertical was like 43 when he was doing rehab. And then he tested like 47.5 on turf, which we wonder if the Vertec was leaning, because that Vertec at dunk camp the first year, everyone tested crazy high the first and second year, like way higher than they tested anywhere else. And that was the same Vertec. So we don't know if that Vertec was leaning a little bit. If I remember correctly, it was, like, just visually looking at it, which makes a difference when you're talking about like half an inch or an inch. So he touched 12 feet, and then he kept retesting, and he couldn't really hit it. He couldn't hit 12 feet again, but his strength numbers went way up. Like his front squat went up to like 300 plus. His back squat kept climbing up. His power clean got up to like 255, 265. Now I think it's like 285 or something like that. Now I think he's front squatting like 315 for 2. Is that what you said, Hunter?
Yeah,
I think he's hit 335 now, right?
Yeah, I think he's hit 335. He did 315 for 2 yesterday, though. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. So he's like, I can't keep these numbers on the top of my head. He just gets strong fast. That's all I know. I read the training. He does the training. He gets better. That's
Magic
literally as simple as that. Yeah. So yeah, now we're looking at him, and he's, this number training age into the training, doing strength, power work, jumping, all the right things, in a very high level program. And, I think even after he was with me at the training camp in my house, whenever I was living in Raleigh with my roommates, Alex and Lauren, was like, well, why am I not jumping 2 to 3 inches higher? Like, even he fell into that, because he's like, I've been jumping, I've been doing Olympic lifts, I've been sprinting, I should be more powerful, I should be able to actualize this, I've had enough jumping reps, and I'm not super fatigued, I've had a week. And so it's like, well, why am I not jumping higher? And it's like, well, first off, this comes back to a conversation we sort of had the other day. Wait, this question just came in. Why is Rivera can't get sucked in air, but he really strong? Can't get stuck in air. Why can't he get stuck in the air? I don't know. Anyways, so he yeah, great question. So so obviously, like I said, we get him all these strength numbers. He's kind of asked the same thing, and it comes back to the conversation I had with Hunter yesterday about like Bondarchuk and kind of these correlations between like different movements. Because everyone always asks me like, what's the best movement? What's the best movement for jumping high? What's the best movement for off 1 foot or 2 foot? What's one single best exercise you have to pick? And their assumption is, well, if I just get this one exercise better, the athlete will get better. Well, guess what? Isaiah got his front squat to like, I don't know, now 335, or his back squat to 385, or his power clean to 285. Like, he's at 175, 180, and he's putting up some crazy numbers in a legitimate power clean, a legitimate back squat, a legitimate front squat. Having worked with like Olympic training at the Olympic training site for the OTC, OTS, I guess, and Olympic weightlifting, like his numbers are crazy for his build and his build and his weight. Like you don't really see that. A 77 at 6'1" with long limbs, like deep ass front squatting, 335 for 2, like that's crazy. I mean, that's the standard for Olympic. That's like the standard I hold my athletes to, is the same standard I held Olympic athletes at the Olympic training site to. Is like, hey, your front squat better be of the same quality and of the same caliber as these athletes if you're working with me. And if it's not, I'm going to keep pushing you to do that, if assuming you don't have any like movement issues or whatever. So it comes back to the issue, what is he doing wrong? Is he doing anything wrong that these strength numbers aren't necessarily correlating to crazy jump heights? The reality is that's true of anything. Like, just because you get better at something that is specific in the sense of training, either neurally or muscularly or coordinatively, it's still a degree of separation away, or sometimes 2 to 3 degrees of separation away from what you're actually doing. And so, if you're like, well, why is he just not, his front squat went up, he should be jumping higher. His back squat went up, he should be jumping higher. His power clean went up, he should be jumping higher. Because like, I told you that those are good lifts for improving your vertical, or I programmed them, so they must be good. Well, obviously, like, it's still degrees of separation away. There's still at that elite, super elite level, getting strong does not mean that you're going to jump higher. Like, we know in research, yeah, there's changes that happen neurally, metabolically, with the muscles that are going to help you jump higher. But just because you get better at them, it does not mean that you always will. And especially when you're talking about an outlier, right? There's always like, anytime there's always a standard deviation of something occurring or not occurring in research. You can go the other direction too. So just because Isaiah wasn't hitting a brand new mark, does that mean we're not going to push those movements higher and higher and higher? No. I mean, it could be fatigue. The legitimate answer to this question, in my opinion, is probably long, like chronic fatigue. Could be on the day he has a level of stimulation on test day, neurally, centrally in his brain, that you can't replicate. I posted about this like a couple days ago. I've been training at this place, 424 Fitness Factory, I think is what it's called in Pittsburgh now. I go into this gym. It's like I think the rim was like 10 foot on the dot. It was 10 foot 2, and we actually lowered it down a little bit because it was too high. Like we measured it, tape measure. I go up, freaking tons of people watching. I go up, destroy a one-hander, like probably my highest jump ever, easily. And you can go to my page, you can look at it, and I literally just wrote in the post, I was like, this is what adrenaline does. This is what the neural approach of jumping has. And so, if you're on test day and you're seeing like someone jump super high like that on test day, or you're at dunk camp, or you're like me and it's really unassuming as a 6 foot unimpressive white guy that walks in, looks like a beanpole, and comes up and out of nowhere, with his freaking bad haircut and bad sense of style, yams a one-hander like that. People are just like, what the hell? Like, that doesn't make sense. Like, you're supposed to be athletic if you can dunk. But that like neural component, you know what I mean? This unassuming element of people not knowing or not expecting that, and then you going and doing that that's what like gets my nervous system going, is when people think I suck, and then there's no expectation and I feel good, and I'm like jittery. I have like this jitter. I'll jump super high. I'll jump out the gym. So, I think with Isaiah on test days, the same thing happens. He's like amped, in specific scenarios. He's like in the perfect environment mentally. And I think that's probably more important than anything else when you're talking about a max test. It's a combination of those two things. But if you're like, there's something called the performance arousal curve. And it's basically like, on the x-axis is arousal and on the y-axis is performance. And as you get more excited, your performance goes up. And then at a certain point, it flips. So someone just said, I hope you finally find a real barber in Pittsburgh. I'm working on it. Thanks. So the performance goes, all the way up as you get, more excited. And then eventually, if you get too excited, it actually goes the other direction. So if you're too amped up, like the nerves are too high, you're like nervous, excitement and anxiety are the same exact thing. The day before Christmas, where you can't wait to wake up, is the same emotion that you get. It's the same physiological mechanism that you get the day before you have a big exam, like the biggest exam of your life. It's the same thing. It's just, the perception of how you're dealing with it. So if you go too far into that excitement or arousal curve, your performance will start to decrease. So you also you're trying to match that with someone's actual physiological preparedness. So you have to get that person to have, like, think about their body almost like a soil for farming. This is almost how I view it. It's like, you have crop rotations and you have like, you can put fertilizer in, you can have more rain, more sunlight, whatever else, right? I mean, you're just talking about you could have bacteria in there, that you're just talking about a biological system that is primed for something to grow. And that's essentially how I view performance. Like, I am giving him all of the resources he needs: nutrition, sleep, diet. Sorry, I said diet twice, different ways. Nutrition, sleep, his training, how well he's like dealing with certain stressors in his life, whether it's like, his roommate leaving or a breakup or his parents told him something crazy. Like, all of those play a role, and you have to, as a coach, hopefully minimize that as much as possible to maximize someone's performance. In the same way, like, I'm dealing with all the stressors along with training too. So I'm trying to get this perfect milieu, this perfect biological like system to occur, so that when he goes out and tests, that his anxiety arousal curve matches his physical preparedness. I'm trying to pull away training elements at a certain time to let him hit it hard and hit that new test. So it's not, and this is why I always say it's not so simple as get your back squat up and you'll jump higher, because it's not. It's literally, like I said, you're taking a number of things, like I use the example of farming, or like cooking I use all the time, right? You're taking all these ingredients and you're putting them together to get the perfect outcome, right? There's just the singular ingredient isn't necessarily going to make something taste, or alone isn't going to be better than the sum of all the parts, right? So if you take all those pieces, take the back squat, took the power clean, pull some things away, add some other things, 2-3 months later down the line, you hit that perfect day, right? It's almost like a storm brewing. You're like, oh, I know it's coming. So there's a big performance coming. Like right now, Tucker Ayers, one of my probably 3 or 4 guys that like have been on the training for almost a long time. I think Tucker's coming up on a year. Tom Barnes, he started as a knee rehab guy. Tom Barnes has been on it, probably one of our longest standing athletes. Cammy's doing one of the most recent cycles. So these guys are on a very recent cycle that I've been like really, really catering to like super high level performance. And obviously like everything I do, trying to get the perfect plan for that individual athlete. But these guys are doing way more volume than everyone else. They're doing way more workload than everyone else. I'm really seeing like, they're almost like, hey, I'm going to test this out. Like I'm going to give you something that I would not usually give to most of my athletes. I'm going to tweak some different variables, and I want to see how are you going to adapt to this? What is your body going to feel like? How are your tendons going to feel like? I'll push the limit with them. I'll push that dial, that needle all the way to the edge that I won't even do with Isaiah, because he probably can't handle the training loads that these guys can. So back to what I was saying, that performance right now might not be good because of that. Like Tucker dunked today on like 9.9, hit it between the legs, but I know that there's way more in the tank to come because I only gave him 6 days of deloading, and I probably loaded him for 3 weeks more intensely than I've ever loaded him in his entire life. So like, it's not just going to be 5 or 6 days before you see that performance come out, right? Maybe he wasn't mentally in it. Maybe he didn't sleep well last night. Maybe he had COVID. Like, who knows?
I mean, I think this goes back to like, in my background, it's more powerlifting, but it's called peaking. And I'm pretty sure it's the same terminology here, but
it is.
Yeah.
Well,
what you're able
to
deadlift 3 weeks before a competition is hopefully not super close to what you're able to deadlift at competition, because you got to back off, let all of that super compensation actually occur, reduce the volume, and then you're peaking at meet day. And hopefully, just as you just discussed, you have peak arousal, you have peak training preparedness, and you're healthy and you're ready to go.
That is exactly right. That's exactly. So if you get into like the nitty gritty training terms, it is super compensation. Super compensation is somewhat simplified in a sense, because it assumes that there's only like, well, it's fitness fatigue, and then it's like, oh, you have this super compensation, and then fatigue dissipates, and it kind of makes some assumptions because the super compensation curve is specific to each fitness variable. So like cardiorespiratory endurance has its own super compensation curve. This is my lens, so I don't know if you could read this in a book, but strength work has its own super compensation curve. Power does. Like super high neural demand things like jumping has its own, sprinting has its own. Everything has a sensitivity to training, and so you're going to have different super compensation curves for each of those variables. So again, jumping, you get back to 2-foot jumping. Well, why doesn't he jump higher? Well, because he could have slept poorly last night. He could have gotten an argument with someone, and that pissed him off. He could have woke up and the weather it wasn't humid enough, and he just didn't walk around enough the day before. So maybe his there's no synovial joint, there's no synovial fluid weeping out of his hyaline cartilage, or and so he wakes up and the joints aren't lubricated, or he doesn't. I mean, we do things to mitigate the risk of that actually happening. Like the day before a big test day, I tell him, hey, go do your warm up, go do your dynamic flexibility. The day before or right before you compete, an hour or two, or the day in the morning, go for a walk, go for a brief warm up or something like that. And then later in the day, I know, hey, look, it's like this time impact of like when you wake up in the morning, you feel like crap. Like especially as you get older, you wake up, you're like, I feel like trash. And then later through the day, you kind of like warm up in a sense, right? Like start to stand up from your chair. It doesn't hurt as bad. Your low back feels good. You're not stiff. Like just like motion is lotion, kind of the same thing. So it's like, you go into, a training session or whatever else, or a testing day, whatever else. And you do that earlier in the day, you mitigate that. You pick a day with good weather. You pick a surface. Surface is huge. Like you're not going to hit 48 inches. You literally have to align. The stars have to align for that to happen, because you're talking about someone that doesn't just test sometimes. He jumps regularly very, very hard. And you're talking about like max effort jumps where all the stars are aligned. You got to do that again. Like the next time you test a month later, same thing has to happen. So turn my gain down because my AC turned on. But
Yeah.
those things have to, could you hear it?
Yeah, no, I mean, I was just getting to like, I don't think people understand how holistic stress is on the body, and that like when you're preparing for a peak event, everything counts as stress. It's not just training stress, it's relationship stress, it's nutritional stress, it's sleep stress. And all of those have to align for a perfect peak outcome. And so like Usain Bolt's not going out and running a 9.58 on some random day. Like he peaked for the Olympics. That's why like all these Olympians were so distraught when this year's Olympics was moved back a year, because they've literally been trying to peak for the last 4 years. And so now pushing back that peak event 1 year changes almost everything.
Yeah. For some people, it's a blessing in disguise. For other people, it's like, shit, I gave myself 4 years. I gave my 2016, the end of the 2016 games, I gave myself 4 years. Now I got to push this out to a fifth. And my entire 4-year macro cycle structure was so that maybe I had a disproportionately more elastic work during this 4th year and less overall workload as a whole. So I would see some crazy boost in performance after the last 3 years of shitty performances. So I would do great at the Olympic Games. And now you're like, oh wait, now I got a 5th year. So guess what? You don't get that time back. You can't remake. If you're a really great coach and you did that, I mean, you're talking next level coaching if you're making those sorts of considerations, but like, you don't get that back. You're not able to, offload or backload an annual plan that is periodized accordingly with more strength work for an entire year. You can't do that. Yeah. So, I mean, there's just a lot of components. So that's really the big answer is really everything I just said, right? Like the reality, he will jump higher because he's training correctly, but it's not just the back squat or front squat. It's everything getting better and me not leaving any stones, like don't leave any stones unturned. You know what I mean? You should check every single box that you possibly can and you're aware of as a coach. So, low hanging fruit, that's easy stuff. The make sure that you wear the right basketball shoes, make sure you pick a nice day, make sure he sleeps a lot. Like, if you do that without training, you're probably going to jump higher, right?
Yeah. I mean, you got to realize like when we're
doing
with Isaiah, like he's not a freak athlete. He's a freak athlete of freak athletes. And so every small variable has a dramatic effect when the difference is
he's actually crazy too, because he'll actually jump high even despite doing the big things bad. That's how crazy of an athlete
just
he
means
actually
when
is.
He peaks properly, it's going to be scary.
Yeah, I know.
With that,
if we can get him to.
Yeah, with that, do you want to start just tackling some quick Q&As here?
Yeah, I actually was going to. Okay. All right, so we'll kind of go through these. So first one, how much does flexibility help with high jump form? Is that something that you should be focused on a lot more than people think? No. So flexibility is way less important than rotation. Rotation's actually everything. Your flexibility in high jump can help a little bit. So if you if you have really flexible hip flexors, you want this bow arch position. So if you can have a tighter bowing position, a tighter arch position, it's almost like a figure skater. If you have your arms wider, like out like this, and you try to spin, you're not going to spin very fast. The same thing happens, if this is the bar and your body's snaking over it. Your body is somersaulting over the bar. So if you think about a diver, when they jump off a diving board, they keep their body really long. They're slowing that rotation down, and then they'll tuck and they'll spin really fast. The same thing is true for high jump. So once you leave the ground, you can't do anything to change the somersault you generated, the momentum that you generated once you left the ground. It's set, right? Gravity is functioning however it's going to function. Air resistance is pretty negligent in high jump. So if you tuck tighter, it's a conversion of angular momentum. Once your angular momentum is set when you left the ground, you're spinning with a certain amount of energy. But if you tuck tighter, that mass, that inertia changes because you're able to pull that mass in tighter, and so you'll spin faster. So that's a benefit. The flexibility part, if you drop more mass lower, your hips can come higher because the center of mass is on a set trajectory. If you drop 20% of your mass by dropping your legs lower, your hips will come higher. Some people focus on that too much and they don't have any rotation, and they'll take off, have no rotation, and they'll just hit the bar. And this is viewed from the side. If you were watching high jump from the side and they were jumping, right, their body should do this type of thing. They're flipping. You plant like this and then rotate. But some people only rotate a little bit and then they don't really somersault much. It kind of looks like an airplane stalling out versus like an arc that you would see on like a javelin or something. So yeah, next question.
Yeah, I mean, just
Javelin's a good example.
yeah, the way I like to think about it, just from a high level, and obviously correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think that flexibility has to be viewed through the lens of why are you trying to get more flexible? Like, are you just getting flexible
100%.
for the sake of getting flexible? Then
Yeah, because it has no performance enhancement if it's not specific flexibility.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, there's a reason I have a jump specific flexibility.
And I think it gets pretty scary when someone gets like really flexible but doesn't train in any of those ranges of motion, and then they get caught in that range of motion, and then you're in bad shape. Like, that's not a good place to be.
Yep. That's like if you're a pitcher and you open up all these ranges of motion and then you try to throw, your shoulders like you literally could like just rip your shoulder out of socket because you don't have any function in that position.
Yeah.
Yeah, not good. Yep. So all right, next one. Oh, did you have something, Hunter?
No.
All right. At John, what's with the beginning of your approach every time you dunk? Everyone loves that, where I hold the ball and I like gallop in. So this goes back to like me growing up and high jumping and stuff. Every time I would high jump, that gallop in, it sets up like an elastic contact, because if you're just standing with 1 foot down and you just like, you got your feet split like this, and then you just push off, like if this is my front leg, this is my back leg, and then you just push off almost like a block start, or, like a receiver. Actually, receivers are interesting because they actually, on their releases, they inherently will push off the back leg, not the front leg, because they're trying to load the back leg and get a lateral release. That's really hard to do just off the front leg. So you'll see it there too, but it's the same thing. You're just trying to get like an elastic push. You're trying to load the musculotendinous unit in the Achilles or whatever else and build a little bit of momentum. Instead of starting from a velocity of 0, you have a gallop in. So my velocity, even if it starts at 3 meters per second, which is like a walk, I probably get to like, I don't know, 3. Well, guess what? That's 3 less meters per second I have to generate off a push off. So that gallop in, it sets up a rhythm. It sets up my coordination for my dribble off of the 2 foot or 1 foot. So that's a lot of the reason why I like to do that little gallop in off 1 foot and 2 foot. And it just harmonically, rhythmically sets you up for everything that you need to do, which is huge in performance. It's coordination, right? If I can sync up the movement correctly, it's not just like how you start the movement sets up how you finish the movement, right? If you see a baseball freaking player set up and whatever thing they do is because they're setting up the rhythm for what's to come. You see a triple jumper, the last phase is as important as the first phase, because like if your last phase sucks, it's probably because your first phase or second phase sucks. And if your first phase sucks, it's because your run up sucks. And if your run up or maybe your takeoff sucks. If your takeoff sucks, it's because your run up or your penultimate step sucks. So it's the step prior to that. So that's why I do that, because it sets me up for the things to come.
Yeah. I just don't think enough people really understand how much of a skill jumping is. Like when I was first getting into John's training, I played Division I baseball, and we had to do some athletic movements, and I always just looked around and saw the freak athletes and just saw them jump, and I thought a jump was, oh, that guy can jump. But I didn't really realize until I really got under John's training that there's a whole other side to jumping that is just developing the skill of jumping. And so like that's such an underutilized modality of training to where you can make pretty significant gains.
It's funny because 100%. It's funny too because like you see in track, right, in sprinting, I love to compare it to other sports and other things, because you see consistencies for a reason. You look at a quarterback, a sprinter, they go through specific exercises to warm up their shoulder, to get their throwing action correct, to practice, baseball players, I've seen this before. They just, flick the ball here and then they'll come here. You come here and then you kind of just, you guys can't see this, but I'm just like doing internal rotation, and then they'll come back here, pause, throw, and then they'll add the hip in, and they'll do this like sequencing, okay? And then you see in track, right, all the sprint development drills, you go high knee, A skip, B skip, right? All these, you like how I can do that with just my hands, even on the rhythm?
Impressive. So, I mean, this goes back to like the training. When you get your training protocol and you see those warm-ups, there's a reason that he has put the warm-ups that John's put in. Those aren't just to look at and be like, so basically all he's trying to do is just get us to sweat. I'm going to go run on the treadmill instead. Like, no. There's a reason that those warm-ups are what they are, to do them.
Yeah, Hunter does a really good job of like understanding it from an outside lens, because he's not like Isaiah, myself, and Connor have a bias. We have the lens of like what we know. So like it's hard for us to step outside of that bias and be like, what was it like when we didn't know? Because we can't go back to that. We already know. So Hunter's nice because he's like, oh, I remember when I did this, and like I just didn't know why I was doing it. And now like as I'm seeing it, I'm like, oh, well, that's why. As I hear this, that's why this happens. So I love that perspective, as well as like being able to keep us on track and host things as well. But yeah, with jumping, the tricky part is yet it's very hard. Our jump dynamic flexibility is specific to 2-foot jumping and 1-foot jumping. The problem is that you can't really sequence the things like you can in throwing or in 2-foot jumping because it's too high on the tendon. The load is too high on the tendon. Like it's very hard to pull those pieces out and sequence it and practice all those individual elements. I mean, maybe this is something actually I just came to my head. You could do it the way baseball does it with throwing, where you start standing like this, just start plantar flexion. You know what I mean? No load, no elastic load. And then maybe you go to a static squat position, jump out of that position. But the problem where that goes out the window is when you have a run up, the run up changes everything. It's not a standing squat jump. It's not a standing jump, right? You're talking about adding in more and more elements. So like, even if you were going to do that standing squat jump, right? Or that pause in the bottom of the squat jump, maybe it has some element. What's up, Lorenz? I'm podcasting. You just made a cameo. So if you go to the bottom of the squat jump, you wouldn't hit the footwork. So what are you going to do? You're going to put your feet in position that you're going to be in the bottom of your jump and then go from there. I don't know if I would necessarily do that. Because one, when you're jumping off 2 feet, you have knee valgus happening, there's rotation happening, there's a bunch of different things happening that are very hard to simulate in a static condition. It's almost impossible. You need to have velocity or momentum to be able to replicate that. You could do walkthroughs of it, and even then, things change as you add another step. So it's very hard to get these progressive sequenced exercises or drills that one, aren't going to add a ton of tendon load, which I might not want to do, or two, are actually going to achieve the goal that I wanted to achieve.
So I think this leads naturally to the next question. What's your favorite part of coaching?
My favorite part of coaching?
Yeah.
Man, that's a good question. I would say my favorite part of coaching. That's a good question. I'm just trying to think of like my
while you're thinking of that.
I actually have one. I got it.
Okay.
I love watching the outcome, the freak performances. I love seeing the change in athletes from day 1 to day 365 to day 690, right? Like,
yeah.
Or whatever, 720, like whatever it is. Like, I love seeing those changes because that's where you see changes. You don't really see crazy changes in 1 month. You sometimes do, especially with kids in development. But I love looking back at Isaiah's progression and being like, wow, 2 years ago, he couldn't even walk upstairs. Now he's one of the best jumpers in the entire world. How did he do that? Like, that's
it's
my
a long
favorite
game.
part of it.
Yeah, it's a long game. And if you just stick to the coaching, you'll see results. Can we
when
jump
I was
on
a
this?
kid, I used to be like, I want to make Batman. How do I make Superman? How do I create average kid, nerdy kid with glasses that weighs 100 pounds? How do I make him look like Superman? How do I do that? Is there a way to do that?
Yeah,
Even
THP,
with crap genetics?
translating human performance.
THP, yeah, translating human performance.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah, Hunter, what were you going to say?
This next question hits near and dear. Baseball player joining THP. Does this mean there will be shoulder exercises coming out for the overhead athletes? If I could take this for a second, I feel you. I played Division I baseball at Tulane University. Shout out. If there's anything that I can do about this, I will make sure that your shoulders are golden, because that is something that I did every single day.
Yeah. And eventually Hunter will be blending into, he's going to just start doing continuing ed, and he does a lot of the off service type stuff. But one of the reasons he does the off service stuff is because he's so freaking good at that stuff. But we need him. I realize he's really good at learning, and I can equip him faster than I can equip most other people because he's super intelligent and super diligent. And he already knows so much about training in general, just because out of me search is research, or research is me search, whatever you want to call it. Whatever you're interested in, you're going to learn a ton about, and then you're going to research it a bunch and research it for other people. And that's how I became interested too. So Hunter will be helping us with that. But that said, I've obviously worked in sports performance for, look at my resume, I don't know, Hunter, you tell me 10 years? I don't even know.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. Yeah, I mean, we're going to be a complete team. So my background is I love biochemistry. I've had 4 knee surgeries. And so in college baseball, we were never really allowed to lift heavy. So research is me search. I dove all into how do I get stronger? How do I prevent another knee injury? And how do I get healthier? So, that's kind of the background that I come from. And John's obviously doing a great job of helping me catch up on the athletic performance coaching side. And so I'm going to keep learning. And then to some point, I'll be able to help you all out.
It's like onboarding. We're onboarding right now.
Yeah. So,
but I'm learning all these fancy words from Hunter. I didn't know what any of this was before.
Yeah, it's a two-way street. So just real quick, succinct, to the point, no explanation. What's the highest, most realistic vertical that Isaiah could hit?
I think Isaiah could hit. He's capable of hitting 50 right now. I think so. Like a legit 50. He's capable of touching 12.3 right now. It's just going to be on the right day. And if he can not pull his quad or something crazy, because if you think about it, no one's ever done that. Like Jordan Kilgannon is the closest I've ever seen, and I've never seen anyone test a legit 50.
That's a real
50.
milestone.
I'm talking like touching 12.3. I think Jay Clark touched 12.3, but his reach was 8.4 or something like that. Like he's 6'3" and longer than Isaiah is, and he's one of the freakiest athletes ever. Like, that's crazy, absolutely insane. So I think Isaiah can touch 12.3. I think in his lifetime, I bet he could touch 12.4-ish. I think in his lifetime. I mean, this is all if he stays healthy and he continues to get stronger and he continues to jump. I think he can touch 12.3 right now, and in his lifetime he could touch 12.4. But I don't like to put limits on him because he really is an example of someone that's like unlike anyone else. Like we've never seen anyone like this before.
Like you ask him what he wants, and he wants to be the best dunker ever.
He literally, that's all he cares about.
Yeah. So,
and I'm like, I just want to know.
That's one of your coaches, guys. Like you got a coach who's literally dedicated to being the best dunker that he could physically be. And he's chosen John to partner up with. So I think that speaks volumes to our coaching. Moving on, what is with CJ? Some real injury because he's out for almost.
Yeah. So you're talking about CJ. I can't. I mean, technically, it's like a HIPAA violation for me to discuss the logistics of this.
Yeah, I was about to say we probably shouldn't touch that. Like, yeah, I mean, we appreciate the questions, but
basically, he's doing what he can to get better. I don't know what I can't really discuss that legally.
Let's not touch that. Okay, ideal weight for average build 5'10", 2 foot jumper, or is there no such thing?
Ideal weight for a 5'2", 2 foot jumper. Is there no such thing? Light as possible, like as much muscle mass as possible, but as light as possible.
You want the highest proportion of like relative strength, right?
Yeah, exactly. So if you can get your relative strength as insanely high as possible, it's going to make a huge difference. And then if you can have as much functional lean muscle mass, which is kind of goes hand in hand because the more cross-sectional area in a muscle, the more force it can produce. So those both go hand in hand. But yeah, really just get your body fat percentage as low as possible, have as much functional muscle mass as possible. That's the build you want. So yeah, next one, back squats or quarter squats or vertical jump. I've heard this come up a couple times. I think Paul made a podcast on this and basically said, to my knowledge, that quarter squats were the most superior jump training, like most specific jump training strength exercise or something like that. Kind of goes back to everything I just talked about, right? Like there's a time and place for everything. Every athlete's different. There's another question about why don't I plan them for Isaiah? He has done them. He just maybe didn't record them.
You just got to realize, like when he's posting to Instagram, he wants to show you impressive feats of strength, right? And so like quarter squats tend to get a lot of hate online.
They get a lot of hate. He's not going to post that. And if he wouldn't care sometimes because it's Isaiah and he would talk about it in context on YouTube, but he's not going to post that on his Instagram. I would post that, but I do program them, so that question is irrelevant. It's just,
it exists, right? There's a time and place for everything, right? There's a time and place for not training. There's a time and place for quarter squat training. So it really does
so
we do individualized training, right? Yeah. So like,
it really depends.
Yeah. If it makes sense for you,
it'll be to Scotty.
Yeah. If it makes sense for you, it'll be in your programming.
I was talking to Scotty Dunks, if you guys know that, Scotty Weaver, and I was like explaining to him, I'm like, you don't understand, like, I was like, I'm picking from like endless variety, like variability, like to pick what I want for someone. Like it's not just like it's not just like everyone gets just like set program. Like that's the question I get. I'm like, no, like I have literally, like there are some weeks that I save and I will use later on and adjust, you know what I mean? Like you could think about a lawyer or something like that. Like when they have these like root, whatever, like contracts, you got to go through and you got to make that specific to what you're doing. I mean, they're like what do you call them? Big stones, Hunter? I forget what you always said.
You got your big rocks that you need to take care of.
Your big rocks. Yeah. There are big rocks you need to take care of, right? And then within that, you have to make sure that things are really dialed in. And that's true for like, if you're looking at jumping athletes, probably should be back squatting, probably should be front squatting, probably should have Olympic lifts. Like those things are big rocks you're going to have in. But then within that, there's hundreds of variables that you can change. I can't even list them all. So, there is a time and place for literally everything. That is the point of my training, is to say, like, it's not just like you might see that one week or people try to copy. You can't really copy it. If you see it, there's nothing in there. You're going to be like, oh, that's so incredible. Like, oh, they're back squatting. Like,
Yeah. Like if you were
it's
to,
how I put it together and it's where I'm going.
yeah. I mean, just think about it. So like if Isaiah filmed every single exercise for 1 week and put it on YouTube, there'd be a lot of people out there that would copy that workout. Well, that workout isn't going to be his workout next week. Right. And so it just,
and even
changes.
if someone copied that, it wouldn't, yeah.
It's specific to Isaiah.
If you copied that week, it's like, yeah, whatever, go ahead. You might see good improvements because the big rocks are there, but like, it's not going to be perfect. There's still a lot of risk associated with it if you try to do that. There's tons of, you could hurt your back. You could literally herniate a disc. You could tear your labrum. You could hurt your Achilles. Like, it's not just like, it's specific for him for a reason. You know what I mean? It's not just like for everyone. You know, if you do that, you might not understand that you're totally offloading his back. Like, so
yeah, and it's not even specific just to him. It's specific to him at this point in time, right? So like next week isn't this point in time. It'll be slightly different next week. So you can copy his workouts and you might get some results, but just realize that you have no context into why he is training the way he is this week and what that might look like next week and what it looked like last week, what it'll look like next month and what it looked like 2 months ago. So
yeah. Okay. Sorry, I turned my gain down for a second. My roommate's putting away groceries. I don't know if you can hear that, Hunter?
Yeah, I can hear
the groceries being put
It's
away?
not too bad though.
Yeah.
But
I'll turn down the gain
I was late. Yeah, I was late. So who's
Hunter?
Hunter? Yeah. It's Hunter, guys.
Hunter is, you'll see a lot more of him. I guess that's probably the best way to say he's part of the team. Which one was a question? How long does it take to build a program for you to build the program for the week for all the THP athletes? Like a lot of time.
All day?
Like every day, like all day. That's all I'm doing is editing programs.
I'll check in on John. Hey, what are you up to? Building programs. Sunday night. What are you doing, John?
What's up? What
Building programs.
That's literally what I do all the time. So it takes all my time for 1 week. And that's why we have to add people like Isaiah and Connor and onboard them and teach them all the things that I know because it's super complex. Anyways, do you keep notes on all the athletes or off the head? So basically we have a WhatsApp chat. And so that is basically our means of making sure that we know exactly what's going on with that athlete at that time. So when I write the programming, I'm looking at what did they do the previous week? And did they say anything to me? Have they communicated anything to me? Or am I good to go the direction that I think this athlete needs to go based off the information that I have? And so generally speaking, the WhatsApp is, we tell this to our athletes, you want to leverage the coaching, leverage the WhatsApp, because WhatsApp is how I know exactly what you are doing, why you're doing, like that's how I'm being communicated the ideas. So the athletes that want to get better, you know, sometimes we have people that jump on and they're just like, whatever, I don't want to communicate. Just, I trust John to just progress things along accordingly, assuming I'm healthy. Perfect. Like, whatever, let's do that. You know, if I see a change in your joint health, if I see a change in, you know, you or whatever, like then I'll make that adjustment. But, you know, that's how we're monitoring that. If you're looking at like, you know, how someone is, or like other cases, you know, the people that really want to get better are super, super active with me. You know, they're, or Connor or Isaiah, whatever, in the WhatsApp. I mean, you're talking about hundreds of threads a day. You're talking about literally 100, 200 threads of messages a day. You know what I mean? So someone might not message more than once a week or whatever, of course, or whatever. Like we get back within, on a business day from 9 to 5 to everyone. There's no doubt we're going to get back to you in those business hours, Monday through Friday. And then on Saturday and Sunday, we still get back to people. After this, I'm going to go answer WhatsApp and write programming. So like, that's how people are able to really leverage the coaching to the max. The more you communicate with me, how your body's feeling, you know, what your tendons are feeling like, how, like what's bothering you, what's not bothering you, circling where areas are sore or whatever else, like then I know how to adjust things, what your vertical was like on the day, what your power levels were like on the day, you know, what no dunks you hit, if you hit any PRs. Knowing that stuff in the WhatsApp helps me cater the program further for that athlete in the future. So, you know, I tell people, don't like blow it up and be annoying because I hate that, but like tell me information I need to know. You know what I mean? If you hit a new strength value, tell me that. If you hit a PR, tell me that. If your vertical went up, tell me that. If you feel like you had a good jump or bad jump, send me your jumps every week. Like if you're a tier 2 athlete, you have access to that. You should be doing that.
Yeah. And just to build off that, I do think it's, by the way, shout out to Anonymous who said that I got you to sign up. I don't know your name, but thank you. I hope you enjoyed the programming so far. But yeah, so just to build back to using WhatsApp, you want to use WhatsApp to better your programming. If you're an athlete that is going to ask a bunch of questions, and then those answers are then going to hinder your ability to exercise in the weight room, just pick and choose the questions you ask. Like for me, when I was in college, I would bug my trainer nonstop at Tulane, and it actually hurt me because I was a mind case when I was in the gym.
He was a head case.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was a head case, and so ask the questions that you want answers to, not ones that are then you're going to go in the gym and you're going to start thinking about a million things. You're not actually going to be able to perform the lift. Like, communicate with us, answer all those pain scores, because that's how we know about training volume. And so if you're not being honest with those, you're just shooting yourself in the foot. Oh, it's the meeting guy. I remember you. Yeah, we're still working on that Luka jersey giveaway, by the way. We're trying to figure out what the first thing we want to give away is. We are working on that. Yeah. Okay, you want to do one more question?
Oh, one thing I'm going to work on. We'll do one more question. Also, my buddy Vinny was in this chat. Shout out Vinny. You texted me privately and said, "Stop saying like. I'll work on it. Thanks."
Okay. One more question.
It also is off the cusp, so that's why. Yeah. Last question. What was the last question?
Sprints or plyos for 1 foot jumpers?
Comes back to the same thing.
It depends.
I'll give you a scenario. If you're a sprinter, you should be sprinting. If you're a jumper, you should be jumping, which is more similar to jumping, plyos. But the risk is higher with plyos. So sprinting is a good way to get all of the neural components, all those boxes checked. You can get super high recruitment values. You can get super high rate of force development. You get the entire force velocity curve, because if you start from 0 and accelerate, you're gonna hit certain velocities at certain joint angles that you're predisposed to hitting anyways, because you're going to pick the best strategy to get you to move from point A to point B. You're going to get crazy Achilles tendon loads that are going to help you adapt against different tendons. You're going to get patella stiffness, probably the fascia in your foot, all those things, coordinating movement for locomotion, all those things are going to happen. So for sprinting, it's super valuable. If I could put more plyos in, I would, but the problem is that the majority of athletes are not ready to do plyos. I am just to the point now where I am doing heavy plyo volume. I've been training for 15 years, something like that. 13 years, 14 years. So or 14 years, yeah. At a high level training, not just like Joe Blow. That's a crazy training age, actually. Most people don't train nonstop in their life. I don't know many people that do that other than pro athletes that do that. And even then, not in the weight room. Yeah. Even track and field athletes, they stop after college.
Yeah.
They start in high school and they stop after college.
Yeah. This isn't the workout where you go into the gym and you do the same exercise, same lift, same reps every week, and you don't see any progress. Like John is training intelligently for years, and he's just not getting to the point where he can really handle that heavy plyo load. So take it for
and even then, I'm still careful with the volumes. So you can't just hammer away at plyo volume and expect it to not have a cost. You have to build into that. You have to really be prepared to do those loads when you're ready for it. Shout out Vinny again. He texted me the other day. He's like, what's the thing? It's like skipping, but jumping from leg to leg. It's like running, but you're jumping from leg to leg. I'm like, oh, you mean bounding? You mean alternate leg bounding? He's like, yeah. I was like, yeah, it's a good exercise, but it's super intense. So
they just don't see 500 pounds on the bar. And they're like, well, it can't be that intense. No, it is.
Well, yeah. So I was like, if you can handle it, go for it. He's like, I'm just trying to get a little bit of pop back in my step. And I'm like, I'm happy to help people from home and stuff like that. So I didn't mind at all. But Vinny used to have crazy bounce in high school, better than my bounce is now. And I just was like, you just got to be careful. It's 15 times body weight if you're good at bounding. He's probably not hitting those loads because you're talking about world-class athletes. That's the loads they're hitting. But it's super intense still, despite that.
Yeah.
So it just depends on who you are, what you're doing, and where you are in that progression. Isaiah's not even at the point where he's doing a lot of plyo volume. Think about that. Yeah. Isaiah Rivera, the person you watch his training every single week, he's not even doing a lot of volume of high level plyos. So if I'm not doing it and he's not doing, or I'm just doing it and he's not even doing it yet, are you even close to the level Isaiah's at? So why would I hammer away at plyo volume unless I will say that. On that note, guys, thanks for listening. Hopefully we'll be doing this more often. Peace out.